Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we dig into the crucial research, cut through all the noise, and hopefully give you that actionable knowledge you need to build a better life. Today, we're doing a really critical deep dive. We're looking at the financial decade that, honestly, it pretty much defines your future, your 20s. Yeah, we spent weeks really analyzing a whole stack of specialized sources. Think research papers, expert interviews, behavioral economic studies, all focused on that moment of financial takeoff. You get the first serious job, right? That first real paycheck, and you get that amazing taste of true independence. But here's the paradox, the central tension that the data keeps showing us. Your 20s, they're the most dynamic decade for personal growth, absolutely. But they're also, well, potentially the most dangerous financial decade. It's when you build that independence, sure, but critically, it's also when the biggest, quietest mistakes tend to happen. Mistakes that they don't even look like mistakes at the time, not until you're maybe 35, trying to figure out, why am I lagging behind? Why isn't my net worth where I thought it would be?
That tension is so real. And if you're listening in your 20s right now, you get it. You feel that pressure. There's just limitless potential, it feels like. But also, wow, it's a steep learning curve, isn't it? The world, it's constantly telling you, spend money, enjoy your youth. Yet the fundamental truth, and this is proven out by the research, is that the silent decisions, the ones you avoid making now, the things you procrastinate on, those are the ones that can set your financial path for decades to come. So our mission today really is to give you a genuine shortcut. We're unpacking the 7 biggest financial pitfalls that the research clearly shows can echo for decades. We want to help ensure that your 30s, your 40s, they're defined by, accumulating wealth, not just playing catch up because you missed opportunities earlier.
Okay, let's dive right in then. Let's start with what might be the single most expensive habit. I mean, more expensive than any high-interest debt or crazy impulse buy. We're looking squarely at mistake number 1, procrastination habit. That comforting but ultimately really destructive belief that, I'll just save later.
Yeah, the core argument, and you see this across all the sources, it's that the most common self-sabotaging sentence young people tell themselves is something like, I'll start saving when I get that promotion, or maybe when my salary finally hits 6 figures. It's just such an offensive delay tactic, It gives you immediate permission to just enjoy 100% of your income right now.
Right. But you're saying saving isn't really about the amount you save, is it? So what's the real point then?
Well, the research consistently shows saving is fundamentally about the habit. It's about building that behavioral muscle, not the total amount of disposable income you have. Think of it like this. If you can't manage to commit to saving, say, just 5% of a $50,000 salary now, the research suggests you'll probably find ways to comfortably spend 95% of a $100,000 salary later on. Lifestyle inflation it eats it up. You're delaying building a really crucial discipline. If that saving habit isn't ingrained early, the money, it just always seems to disappear into, discretionary spending.
And delaying that habit, even by just a few years, that's where the power of compounding really, really penalizes you. This is the part that feels almost unfair, but it's just pure math.
That's the engine. That's the engine of financial growth right there, compound growth. What's really fascinating, I think, is that every single dollar you manage to save in your 20s, that first decade of real independence, it's mathematically guaranteed to work harder for you than any dollar you save later. It just is. It's not abstract. That dollar has, 35 or 40 years? To earn returns on top of returns, it's generating interest on the principal, and then crucially, it's generating interest on that accumulated interest.
Okay, let's make this concrete. Let's look at the illustrative data point that was in the research, because honestly, it makes the cost of waiting. Well, it's terrifyingly clear. We need to internalize this one.
Okay, so imagine 2 people. Let's say they're both aiming for retirement around age 62, and both get the same average market return over time. Person A starts saving at age 22, just puts away a modest $100 a month consistently. Person B, though, they wait. Just 10 years. They start at age 32. But they realize, I'm behind, so they decide to double their contribution. They put in $200 a month. Okay, so person A, who started early with less, actually ends up accumulating over $300,000 by retirement age, just through consistency. Person B, who invested double the monthly amount but waited that decade, they actually end up with significantly less, often closer to only $200,000.
Wait, hang on. They invested twice as much per month, $200 versus $100, and still came up over $100,000 short, just because they waited 10 years.
Yeah.
Wow, that's an enormous penalty for just 10 years of doing nothing.
Yeah, exactly. The total cash person B put in might have been roughly the same, maybe even a bit more over the shorter period, but they completely forfeited an entire decade of that exponential growth right at the beginning. The research actually calls this waiting to save later potentially the single most expensive financial decision you can possibly make, because you're essentially trading future, almost guaranteed growth for what?
Oh.
Fleeting current consumption. You simply cannot buy back those early years of compounding. They're gone.
Okay, so this procrastination issue, mistake number 1, it leads us directly into mistake number 6, doesn't it? It's like the second half of the same problem. It's the failure not just to save, but then to actually invest those savings. And both seem rooted in that same inertia, that feeling of, oof, this is too complex.
Oh, absolutely. It's that classic paralysis by analysis trap. You see people, especially young professionals, they just feel completely overwhelmed by the jargon, right? PE ratios, volatility, asset classes. They make this assumption that investing, well, that's only for the super rich or, finance wizards. So what happens? They just sit on cash, maybe in a standard savings account, which, let's be honest, when you factor in inflation, especially over the last few years, it means they are basically guaranteeing a loss of purchasing power every single year.
Okay, so how do we fight that complexity argument? How do we simplify it, make that barrier to entry feel lower?
The foundational rule, the one the sources really emphasize, is this. Investing success is almost purely about time in the market. It's not about the impossible task of timing the market. Nobody can do that consistently. You don't need some secret algorithm or, super sophisticated strategies to actually succeed long term. What you really need is just consistency, diversification, and keeping fees low. The entry point doesn't require being an expert. It just requires understanding maybe 2 key simple concepts.
All right, let's define those. When the research talks about broad funds or index strategies, what are we actually talking about in practical terms for someone just starting out?
Yeah, good question. We're essentially talking about highly diversified funds. They're often called index funds or ETFs, exchange-traded funds. And what they do is they simply track the performance of an entire market segment, like, say, the S&P 500, which is 500 of the biggest U.S. companies, or maybe even the total U.S. stock market. For a beginner, someone in their 20s, these are transformative because they give you maximum diversification with, minimum effort and often near zero expense ratios, which is huge. You're basically buying a tiny little slice of hundreds of the world's most successful companies all at once.
Okay, so that dramatically lowers the risk, right? Because you're not just betting on one single company to hit it big.
Precisely. If one company in that index fails, the impact on your overall portfolio is pretty minimal. And furthermore, probably the simplest automated strategy available, especially for someone in their 20s, is often what's called a target date fund. You just pick the fund that's dated for roughly when you think you'll retire, say 2065 if you're young now, and the fund manager behind the scenes automatically adjusts the risk level for you over time. More stocks when you're young and can handle volatility, shifting gradually towards more bonds as you get closer to retirement. You don't have to lift a finger. It directly tackles that it's too complicated fear. The goal here is really automation, consistency, and just starting early. Ideally, if you can, doing it through something like a Roth IRA. That offers tax-free growth on your earnings, which is a massive advantage, especially for someone likely in a lower tax bracket in their 20s.
Yeah.
The earlier you start this kind of automated process, honestly, the easier wealth accumulation becomes down the road. The market does the heavy lifting for you.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit now. Let's move from that passive growth side of things to more active behavioral decisions, specifically around debt and credit. This is an area where I think the difference between having a resilient financial foundation and, frankly, a really fragile one often gets decided. So we're moving into mistake number 2, treating credit cards like they're free money.
Oh, this is such a seductive trap, isn't it? You get your first credit card, maybe it has a decent limit, like a few $1,000s, and it feels like an instant pay raise. The research clearly identifies the core error here. Treating that available credit limit, which is the bank's money, let's be clear, as if it were your own extra disposable income that you somehow earned.
Yeah, and we all know the classic examples of misuse, especially in this decade, right? Swiping it for clothes you don't strictly need, those expensive dinners out, maybe even financing a spontaneous weekend trip or vacation. The card becomes this tool to get what you desire right now without really thinking about the cost tomorrow. So what's the real consequence when that payment due date arrives and you think, I'll just pay the minimum?
That is precisely where the financial wrecking ball hits. When you only pay the minimum amount due, you are actively converting what felt like low-friction purchasing power into absolutely crushing high-interest debt.
Let's just quickly dive into the mechanics because it's important. Most credit cards carry an annual percentage rate, an APR, that hovers somewhere around 20%, sometimes even higher. And this isn't simple interest we're talking about. This is compound debt. The interest accrues daily, usually on your outstanding balance. And then the very next day, you're paying interest on yesterday's interest. It snowballs incredibly fast.
Wow. Yeah. When you put it like that, it sounds like
A total horror show.
It really can be. Consider a pretty common scenario. Maybe you're carrying a $3,000 balance on a card with a 22% APR, which isn't unusual. If you only make the minimum payment, and that minimum is often calculated as just 2% to 4% of the balance, plus the interest owed, it could easily take you over 8 years to pay off that original $3,000 debt. And by the time you're done, you'll end up paying somewhere close to $5,000 or maybe even $6,000 total for purchases that were only worth $3,000 in the first place. Think about that. That $1,000 flight you took impulsively in your mid-20s, it just cost you closer to $2,000 and 8 years of financial stress paying it off. Smart credit use builds your financial credibility, your score. Dumb credit use, well, it just guarantees long-term stress.
Okay, so we need the hard rules then. Pulling from the sources, for anyone building their foundation right now, what are the specific, non-negotiable guidelines for using credit cards?
All right, 3 key rules. First, the rule of 0. You absolutely must pay the full statement balance every single month, no exceptions. A credit card should only ever be used as a short-term convenience tool, maybe for points or tracking, never ever as a financing vehicle for things you can't afford outright. Second, your credit utilization ratio is crucial. You need to keep your reported balance, the one on your statement, under 30% of your total available credit limit across all cards. Ideally, actually, aim for below 10%. A low utilization ratio signals to creditors that you're disciplined, you're responsible, and that instantly helps boost your credit score. And third, this is more psychological but just as important. Internalize the rule that you never treat debt as cash. If the money isn't actually sitting in your checking account before you swipe that card, then you simply cannot afford the purchase, period.
And sticking to those rules you just laid out, that directly tackles mistake number 3, doesn't it? Which is ignoring your credit score entirely. The blind spot here seems to be this really common assumption among young adults, something like, look, I'm in my 20s, I'm years away from needing a mortgage, so why does my score even matter right now?
Yeah, that assumption is unfortunately quite naive, and it can be really costly. Your credit score, that simple 3-digit number, it's basically a measure of your financial trustworthiness. And its reach, its influence, extends far, far beyond just qualifying for big loans like mortgages or car loans. Many young adults, they just don't check it regularly. They often don't even know what components make it up, or they just assume it's this passive thing happening in the background of their financial lives.
Okay, so can you walk us through that broad reach then? Where does that score actually impact a young person, like right now, today?
Well, housing is a big one, immediately. Landlords and property management companies, they almost always run credit checks when you apply for an apartment lease, especially in competitive rental markets. A poor score can mean you have to pay a much higher security deposit, sometimes double or triple, or you might even be denied the lease altogether. Beyond that, it significantly affects your insurance rates. The actuarial tables that car insurance and even renters insurance companies use often show a correlation between poor credit history and a higher likelihood of filing claims. So you literally end up paying hundreds, maybe even thousands, more over the years just for standard coverage simply because of a low score. And furthermore, even simple things like setting up utilities, electricity, water, internet, or getting a new cell phone contract without a hefty deposit can require a good credit check. It really is like a mandatory background character shaping your daily financial life.
Wow. So neglecting your score today actually has immediate quantifiable cash costs. It literally makes everything else in life more expensive.
Absolutely. And the research consistently reinforces the long-term view here, too. Building good credit early provides you with freedom later. A good score, let's say 740 or higher, doesn't just get you approved for that mortgage eventually. It gets you the lowest possible interest rate available at the time. And that difference in interest rate, even just 0.5% or a full percent, can save you tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars over the 30-year life of that loan. So for the 20-something listening, the key components of that FICO score to really focus on are payment history. That means never, ever missing a single payment deadline, ever. Set up auto pay if you have to. And second, that credit utilization ratio we talked about, keeping balances low relative to limits. The simplest action is just to use credit responsibly. Maybe put one small recurring monthly bill like Netflix on a credit card and set it to auto pay the full balance each month. That starts building a long, perfect payment history, which is golden.
All right, moving into section 3 now. Here we're tackling some of the, let's say, internal and external psychological roadblocks to building wealth. Let's start internally with mistake number 4. Simply not tracking where your money actually goes.
Ah, yes. This is almost the defining symptom of financial stress for so many people in this age group, isn't it? That feeling of being perpetually broke, even when maybe your paycheck has actually increased. People genuinely believe, often, that they're sticking to some kind of budget, usually one that just exists vaguely in their head, and then they get to the end of the month, look at their bank balance, and just wonder, where on earth did all the cash go?
Right, and the research seems to identify that the real culprit here usually isn't the big, obvious fixed expenses like your rent or maybe a student loan payment. Those are usually accounted for.
Correct. The true budget killer, the thing that bleeds you dry without you noticing, is the silent, cumulative damage done by what the sources often call low-friction spending, or those small daily expenses. Our modern digital economy is literally designed to make spending as frictionless as possible, right? One-click ordering, saved credit card details, super easy subscription signups.
Okay, let's list some of those quiet drains. Because I think they're incredibly relatable, and they're insidious precisely because they seem small individually.
Oh, they are tragically easy to overlook. You've got the daily, or maybe even semi-daily craft coffee habit. That adds up incredibly fast. Then there's the sheer proliferation of subscription services, Netflix, Spotify, maybe a gym app, news sites, gaming services, you name it. Don't forget the often exorbitant fees associated with food delivery apps. Those service fees, delivery fees, tips, they can easily add 30% or more to the actual cost of the meal itself. And of course, there's just good old-fashioned impulse shopping online, maybe late at night, that conveniently gets delivered 2 days later before you've even really thought about it. People commonly overestimate how much their major fixed costs are impacting them, and they wildly, wildly underestimate the aggregate drain of these small repeated purchases, these little leaks. They can easily siphon away $300, $400, even $500 a month without you really feeling each individual transaction.
Okay, so fixing this. Does it require setting up some elaborate, super time-consuming spreadsheet system? Because that just feels like another chore, another layer of work that people will probably avoid.
Not at all, actually. The sources argue pretty strongly against adding unnecessary complexity here. The solution doesn't require becoming a meticulous accountant overnight. It simply requires awareness. The real behavioral shift happens when you just confront the raw data. Whether you use one of the many free budgeting apps out there that automatically categorize your transactions pulled from your bank account, or you simply commit to reviewing your bank statement carefully once a week. Just seeing where the money actually went naturally leads to almost immediate behavioral correction for most people. When you see, black and white, that you spent, say, $200 just on delivery fees last month, that visual confrontation creates the necessary friction, the pause, that makes you more likely to choose to cook next time. Awareness really has to precede any meaningful change.
Okay, this next mistake, mistake number 5. This one feels like it's arguably amplified, like tenfold by modern social media platforms. We're talking about that intense pressure to keep up with everyone else. The sources identify this as basically the enemy of genuine wealth.
Oh, absolutely. It's the constant, expertly curated highlight reel of everyone else's life, isn't it? The peer pressure that maybe used to exist just locally within your immediate circle is now broadcast globally, 24/7, right into your pocket. It's incredibly easy to scroll through Instagram or TikTok and look at friends or peers or even influencers you don't know and just feel intensely behind. They always seem to have nicer clothes, be taking more exotic vacations, maybe leasing a fancy car or living in that trendy downtown apartment you know you can't afford. The pressure to signal success, even if that success is purely performative and funded by debt, it's incredibly intense, especially in your 20s.
And this pressure, it often forces people to make financial decisions that prioritize that external image over actual long-term security. But what's the core truth that the research reveals about this whole facade?
The core truth, and this is one that should actually be both comforting and maybe a little sobering, is that most people who look rich are actually deeply broke, or at least heavily leveraged. They are very often using debt credit cards, personal loans, car leases to project an image of success they haven't actually achieved financially yet. That leased luxury car, that amazing-looking vacation photo, it's often entirely financed. They effectively spend their 20s and sometimes well into their 30s just digging themselves into a debt hole to maintain an image they think their peers expect or demand.
Yeah.
That's not freedom. That's voluntarily signing up for what some call a golden cage, where your monthly debt payments dictate every single career choice and life decision you make.
So how does the listener, how do you reorient your strategy? How do you fight back against this pervasive social pressure?
You really have to consciously shift your focus entirely inward. And you have to start thinking long-term. The counter strategy is actually pretty simple in concept, but it requires real discipline and practice. It's this. Live conspicuously below your means. Save aggressively, even when it feels a little uncomfortable or uncool, and invest early and consistently in those simple, boring index funds we talked about. Your primary goal in your 20s should not be to impress anyone on Instagram this weekend. Your goal should be to buy yourself optionality and genuine financial freedom later in life. Just remember this key insight from the research. True wealth is almost always quiet, almost invisible, but debt. Debt is always loud, always demanding your attention and your money. Choose quiet wealth.
Okay, for our final analytical section here, let's move towards building resilience and really future-proofing your career and income. We're focusing now on mistake number 7, which is all about financial security and what feels like an increasingly dynamic, sometimes pretty volatile economy.
Yeah, the research on this is becoming increasingly clear, relying solely on one single full-time job for 100% of your income. That's now widely considered a pretty high-risk proposition, especially for young people just starting out their careers.
And why is that reliance, that single point of failure, particularly dangerous now, say, in the mid-2020s economy, compared to maybe previous generations?
Well, the whole world of work is just undergoing such radical transformation, isn't it? Job stability, the kind our parents or grandparents might have expected, it's just not the same thing anymore. Companies undergo layoffs, sometimes seemingly out of the blue. Entire industries can pivot almost overnight based on new technology or market shifts. And critically, we're seeing technological disruption, especially with the rapid acceleration of AI, starting to automate not just administrative tasks, but even some creative and analytical roles much faster than anyone predicted. So if that single income source you rely on suddenly disappears, your entire financial foundation can just crumble instantly. Building extra income streams, it's really no longer just a luxury for the super ambitious among us. It's becoming an essential strategic security measure for everyone.
And the 20s, specifically, they present this kind of unique window of opportunity for experimenting with this, right?
Absolutely. This is your decade, generally speaking, of maximum energy, maximum capacity to learn new things quickly, and often you have minimum fixed obligations compared to later life. Fewer mortgages, maybe no childcare costs yet. You have to use that energy and that flexibility to experiment with income generation now. If a little side project or hustle fails in your 20s, the cost, the risk is relatively low. But if it succeeds, even modestly, you've just built yourself a potential lifeline.
Okay, so what are some specific actionable examples of these different income streams? Can we categorize them beyond just, get a second part-time job?
Yeah, definitely. The sources tend to suggest thinking about potential streams in maybe 3 broad ways. First, you could leverage skills you already have, maybe from your main job or hobbies, for scalable freelance work. Think things like specialized consulting in your field, graphic design, writing, coding, tutoring, things people pay for. Second, you could focus on creating semi-passive digital products. This takes upfront work but can pay off over time. Things like creating an online course in an area you're knowledgeable about, writing an ebook, selling digital downloads like templates or stock photos. Or third, and this ties back to our earlier discussion, you can focus on building an investment portfolio that starts to generate its own cash flow, even if that cash flow is just reinvested automatically at first. This could eventually come from dividend-paying stocks or maybe even small investments in fractional real estate through REITs or crowdfunding platforms.
And the power of these small streams, even if they only bring in, say, a couple $100 extra a month initially, that shouldn't be underestimated, right? That's foundational capital.
That is the entire point, exactly. The research really emphasizes the immediate financial breathing room that even an extra $200 or $500 a month can create. That's capital you can then use to aggressively fund your emergency savings account, getting that safety net in place faster. Or you could use it to max out your Roth IRA contributions each year. Or maybe you use it as seed money to launch a larger, more ambitious side venture down the line. The key is it gives you options. And options are really the ultimate form of financial security in today's world. Think about it. If you really dislike your main job, having that side income, even if it's small, might give you the cushion you need to actually walk away and find something better rather than feeling trapped there.
Okay, so we've navigated through the 7 big concrete mistakes. But the sources also point to one final, maybe more hidden, behavioral mistake. One that kind of dictates whether you even follow these 7 rules or just ignore them. It requires reframing how we even think about wealth itself. The bonus tip is challenging that limiting belief that money is purely about numbers, just math, budgets, spreadsheets.
Exactly. This really shifts the entire focus away from just the technical mechanics, the saving, the investing, the budgeting, and onto the behavioral and psychological engine that's actually driving those mechanics. Financial success, it turns out, is perhaps 80% psychology, habits, and discipline, and maybe only 20% the actual technical knowledge or mechanics. Wealth truly, truly starts in the mind.
And what's fascinating here, reading through the research, is the almost self-fulfilling nature of having a poor financial mindset, often rooted in these money scripts that we unconsciously adopt, maybe from our families or the culture around us.
Oh, those scripts absolutely guide your behavior, whether you realize it or not. If you operate under the subconscious belief that you're just inherently bad with money, for instance, or maybe you believe that rich people are somehow inherently greedy or evil, or that you yourself are just destined to struggle and never get ahead financially, you will almost certainly unconsciously engage in self-sabotaging behavior. You'll avoid learning about things like compound interest because it feels overwhelming or irrelevant to you. You'll delay opening that investment account. You'll prioritize immediate gratification over that harder, long-term discipline. Your actions inevitably end up aligning with your internal beliefs, even if those core beliefs are completely irrational or unhelpful.
So if mindset is potentially the biggest hurdle, the biggest governor on financial progress, how do we tune that engine? How do we cultivate that engine of success?
Well, financial growth requires intentional mental growth. It doesn't just happen. The sources strongly urge you to actively seek out knowledge and perspectives that challenge your existing limiting beliefs about money. That means maybe reading some key books on financial psychology and behavioral finance. It means consciously trying to surround yourself, even if just online, with mentors and peers who clearly prioritize long-term thinking and financial health. And it means actively working to replace those destructive money beliefs with more positive financial affirmations, backed up by small, consistent, disciplined habits. Learning about money and actively developing a healthy, growth-oriented money mindset. That's arguably the foundational investment that makes implementing all the other 6 steps we discussed actually possible. Hashtag final synthesis and takeaways.
Wow, okay. We have covered a lot of ground today, really digging into the major financial pitfalls that seem particularly unique to this independent-seeking decade of your 20s. I think the overarching synthesis, the big takeaway, is crystal clear. Your 20s are, without a doubt, the most potent foundation decade you will ever experience financially. Every habit you build now, every good decision you make, and yeah, unfortunately, every mistake you make, too. It all compounds massively over time.
Absolutely. So maybe let's do a really rapid, actionable recap. What are the critical behavioral and tactical steps that come directly from avoiding these 7 mistakes? This is like your minimum viable financial foundation. 1, do not wait to save. Start now, even small, to capture that irreplaceable compound growth. 2, use credit cards strictly as scoring tools. Pay the full balance every single month religiously. Get rid of any high-interest debt ASAP. 3, gain awareness. Track exactly where every single dollar is going. No more guessing. 4, invest early and consistently, ideally using those simple, low-cost index funds, perhaps in a tax-advantaged account like a Roth IRA if you can. 5, live deliberately below your means. Prioritize your long-term freedom over trying to impress people with current appearances. 6, build financial security and resilience by cultivating multiple income streams, however small they start. And 7, never stop learning. Relentlessly pursue financial knowledge to strengthen your mindset and challenge those limiting beliefs.
And if you actually adhere to those steps, I mean, the math we discussed earlier basically guarantees you will place yourself dramatically ahead of the curve compared to your peers who procrastinate. Your 30s and 40s can then shift from being these frantic decades of maybe playing catch-up or damage control to becoming powerful decades dedicated entirely to building true, resilient wealth and achieving really meaningful freedom in your life.
Which I think raises a really important final question for you, the listener, to maybe mull over after this. True financial success, it's very rarely about luck. It's almost exclusively about making smart decisions. Decisions made early, made often, and made with clear purpose. So the question is, which of these 7 critical decisions will you choose to make differently starting today?
That's an essential provocation to end on. Thank you so much for engaging with us in this crucial deep dive. We really hope it helps you build the financial future you deserve.
Yeah, we hope this information provides both the clarity and maybe the motivation you need to make some powerful choices today and just start procrastinating on your future self.
Don't forget to subscribe, and thanks for watching.